The fork hit the plate. A sharp ping cut through the music. That was the moment everything changed. It was my 27th birthday, a dinner that smelled like money and rehearsed smiles. My parents had chosen La Meridienne, a restaurant where every glass gleamed like crystal, and every laugh sounded planned. My mother's diamonds threw light across the table. My father's cufflinks flashed under the chandelier. Everyone looked perfect, polished, and distant, and I just felt out of place. Then the door opened. Uncle Richard walked in like he still owned every room he entered. Tall, silver hair. Power that didn't speak rooms did. Even the waiter stopped to breathe. He smiled, once sharp, polite, and cold, and took his seat across from me. Conversation thinned to nervous air. He lifted his glass, eyes steady. "Where's the 5 million, Claire?" The words sliced through the room. Every fork froze midair. My mother's hand stopped halfway to her wine. My father swallowed, his throat tight. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard him right. What, 5 million? The air thickened, every heartbeat echoing louder than the music. Uncle Richard leaned back, calm as ever. "The family trust," he said quietly. "The one I set up for you when you were born." My mother's signature flashed in my head, the shaky loop from the envelope she'd signed years ago. For a second, my stomach dropped before my mind caught up. I looked at them. My mother's smile trembled at the corners. My father stared at his plate like the answer might be written there. No one spoke. The chandelier hummed above us, a soft electric sound that filled the silence. I tried again, slower this time. "What trust?" Richard didn't blink. "That's what I'd like to know." The candle beside me flickered, casting shadows across the silverware. My stomach twisted. The air was too heavy to breathe. And in that quiet, I understood this wasn't a birthday dinner. It was a setup, a test. And somehow, I was the one being tested. I didn't sleep. Not after that dinner, not after the question that split my world in half. My mind replayed Uncle Richard's words again and again. "Where's the 5 million, Claire?" Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my parents' faces frozen between guilt and silence. By morning, I was still sitting on my couch, the city waking outside my window. I told myself to breathe, to think, but the truth gnawed louder than the traffic below. If the trust was real, someone close had lied for years. Before all this, my life was simple, messy, but mine. A small apartment on the edge of the city, secondhand furniture, a kitchen that complained every time I turned the faucet. I worked as a junior designer for a tiny startup that paid more in promises than in cash. My days were long, my fridge was empty, and my hope came in coffee cups and sketchbooks. My parents lived 20 minutes away, in another world, entirely glass walls, infinity pools, and the kind of silence money buys. They called sometimes, "Found something stable yet?" Then hung up before I could answer. I told myself I was out of their grip. I paid rent on time, worked weekends, skipped vacations. I wore independence like armor, pretending it didn't crack. But the truth was, I still wanted them to see me, to care. Now, I sat in that same apartment, realizing they'd been sitting on millions that were meant for me. My pride, my struggles, my late nights, they'd watched it all, knowing I was drowning while they floated on stolen air. I thought back to my college graduation, the book they gave me, Financial Independence for Young Adults. I smiled for the cameras that day, holding a gift that was supposed to teach me responsibility. What I didn't know was that they'd already taken everything that could have made me free. Outside, the city kept moving, bright and oblivious. Inside, I felt the ground shift beneath every memory I had. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel broke. I felt robbed. The next morning, my phone buzzed before sunrise. A message from Michelle, noon. "He's expecting you." I stared at it until the letters blurred. Then I got dressed and went anyway. By noon, I was standing under a tower of 40 stories of glass. Inside, the air cold from overcooled vents pressed against my skin. Michelle met me in the lobby, tablet in hand, face steady. "He's ready," she said, and led me down a hall that swallowed sound. Uncle Richard sat behind a wide oak desk, sunlight cutting across the floor. No small talk. He gestured to the chair. A man in a gray suit waited beside him. Daniel Ross, my uncle said. He manages the Hart Family Trusts. Daniel opened a folder and slid it to me. Pages. Dates. Transfers. This is the trust created in your name 27 years ago, he said. Initial deposit, $1 million. With growth, it should be about $5 million today. He paused, but it isn't. My throat tightened. How much is left? He looked up. $240,000. Silence thudded in my ears. I turned the pages with stiff fingers. Lines of withdrawals, neat as stitches. My name is on the top. Their signatures are below. Same shaky loop on my mother's signature. I'd seen it before, on an old envelope she'd signed without looking. Daniel kept his voice even. The money was siphoned over a decade, labeled as investments, renovations, and asset management. Most routes pass through your parents' accounts. I traced a date with my fingertip. The year I graduated, another line. The month I begged them for help and got a lecture instead. They took it, I said, barely hearing myself. They took everything. Uncle Richard didn't rush in with comfort. He watched me absorb the numbers like someone who'd seen this storm on the horizon for years. You needed the truth, he said quietly. Now you have it. I closed the folder. The room seemed colder. Every late night, every skipped meal, every rent panic replayed in my head, except now it had a ledger. I wasn't unlucky. I wasn't irresponsible. I wasn't even broke. I was robbed. When I walked into the private conference room, the temperature felt 10 degrees colder. My parents were already seated across from Uncle Richard, hands folded like school children waiting for punishment. My mother's lipstick was too bright. My father's cufflinks gleamed under the recessed light. Richard didn't look up from the folder in front of him. You know why we're here? He said. My father started first. It wasn't lost, it was invested. His tone was calm, almost rehearsed. Invested, Richard repeated. In Teslas, vacations, in your kitchen remodel? My mother's voice broke in, soft but sharp. We were managing it, Richard. She was too young. You wouldn't have handled that kind of money responsibly, she said, turning toward me with a trembling smile. We only wanted to protect you. Richard looked up slowly. His voice was even, but his words hit like stone. That's not protection. That's theft. No one moved. The sound of the clock on the wall filled the silence between us. My father cleared his throat. We were gonna tell her. When? Richard interrupted. After you finish selling the Malibu house? The color drained from my mother's face. Richard, please. He leaned back in his chair, eyes never leaving hers. You stole from your daughter, and you lied to me. The lawyers will finalize the restitution papers tomorrow. My father tried to speak again, but the weight in the room had shifted. Richard's authority filled every corner like thunder rolling through glass. He turned to me. Claire, the decision to press charges is yours. The words felt heavy, too real. My hands shook as I closed the folder. I met my mother's eyes, her mascara streaked but her expression still defensive, like guilt disguised as love. I'll decide tomorrow, I said quietly. Then I slid the folder toward me. And I want copies. All originals stay. The room went silent again. Outside the glass, the city moved like nothing had changed. Inside, everything had. A week later, I was called back to Richard's office. This time, there were no shadows, just daylight cutting through the glass and 3 folders stacked neatly on the table. My parents sat across from us again, smaller somehow, like the chairs had grown around them. Daniel, the attorney, stood with a calm professionalism that carried the weight of finality. The preliminary forensic audit is complete, he said. Through emergency injunctions, a court-appointed receiver, and asset freezes, we've recovered $2.6 million so far from the Malibu getaway property and personal accounts. Remaining assets are under review. My mother exhaled shakily. That's everything. We've given it all back." Richard didn't blink. "You'll sign the stipulation of restitution and consent to judgment. You'll live with the consequences." My father leaned forward, his voice frayed. "Claire, we made mistakes. But prison? We're your parents." I looked at him, at both of them faces I'd once memorized, now unreadable. "You already did it to me," I said. "You took everything and called it love." The silence cracked under the weight of my next words. "I'm not pressing criminal charges. We settle on paper." Richard studied me for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. "Mercy, not weakness," that's what his eyes said. My parents signed the documents. Each pen stroke sounded like a door closing. When it was over, no one spoke. The lawyer gathered the papers. Richard simply said, "Leave the keys with security." Within weeks, the court entered a stipulated judgment, and the transfers cleared. The Malibu property, both Tesla's and the accounts, all reverted under my name. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like air after drowning. I moved into the Pacific Heights apartment that night. It was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that used to scare me, but now it feels earned. I stood by the window watching the city shimmer under fog and sodium light. Family, I realize, isn't about blood. It's about who stands beside you when truth costs everything. And as the glass tower lights flickered across the bay, I knew this. They'd taken my future once. But this time, I'd taken it back, piece by piece, quietly, completely. Weeks passed, but silence stayed. The kind of silence that doesn't hurt anymore, it just breathes beside you. I moved into the Pacific Heights apartment my parents had once called an investment. The first night, I stood by the window, looking over the city lights, and whispered to myself, "It's mine now." The air felt different, lighter, cleaner. For the first time, I wasn't surviving. I was living. The court finalized everything 2 weeks later. The properties, the accounts, the trust, every document carried my name. My parents didn't fight it. Maybe they couldn't. Maybe guilt finally did what decency never could. They sold their cars, their jewelry, their perfect image just to stay afloat. Uncle Richard said they'd moved into a small rental on the other side of the bay. I didn't ask for details. Some stories don't need revisiting. Work came slowly, then steadily. I started freelancing again, but this time on my terms. No panic, no hunger, no pretending. Every morning, I made coffee and opened my laptop to the same view, fog rolling over the bay like a second chance. Madison, my best friend, visited often. We'd sit on the floor with takeout, laughing like we used to before everything changed. One night, she asked, "So how does it feel?" I thought about it for a while. "It feels quiet," I said. "Not happy, not sad. Just right." Uncle Richard grew weaker over the months. The last time we met, he smiled and said, "You did what I couldn't. You drew a line." I told him, "You taught me how." He laughed softly, the kind of laugh that sounds like forgiveness. Now, when I pass La Meridienne, I don't look away. I see the table where my old life ended and my real one began. That night didn't destroy me, it freed me. It showed me that loyalty without honesty is just a contract of silence. Family isn't about blood. It's about choice. About the people who show up when truth finally does. My parents took my trust fund, but they taught me something priceless, how to trust myself. And sometimes that's the only wealth that lasts. If you've ever been betrayed by the people you trusted most, stay with me. The next story might sound uncomfortably familiar. Subscribe for more true revenge stories that hit where it hurts.